Listen, there's so much to talk about here. Joining us from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, welcome the author of the best-selling book, The Master Identity Thief, Dartanyon A. Williams. Dartanyon, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, listen, you're revealing so much about the crime and how you got away with it. I have to start at the beginning. You were 15 and you stole your dad's credit card. You said in that piece it gave you purchase power. What did it do for you? You're 15? What do you know about purchase power?
I was a curious kid, and there was TV commercials that was influencing that thought process. So I was wanting to have the liberty, the power, the license to acquire, pursue rather the luxurious items that I gained and garnered my attention.
At 15?
At 15 years of age.
So you're being lured in at age 15. You want it. You want the life. I mean, we call it bling now, but then you just wanted to have it all, whatever that was called. So you stole your dad's credit card. How did your parents react when they learned that you had taken their identity? I can only imagine being from the South and the background that you have, it wasn't good.
Not at all. My dad is more calm, cool, and collected, but my mom reacted with hysteria. I mean, my mom is a disciplinarian. She is a realist, and she is the one that, slap now and ask questions later. But in this particular case, she had already put down her investigation. She had the results of it, and she just decided to, make an example out of me, if you will.
How did they bust you? How did they find out it was you?
Well, instead of my dad's payment card, I was actually making the monthly minimum payments. And I did not know at the time that if the balance increases, so does the monthly minimum payments. And I was sending in the monthly minimum payments to keep the crime concealed, if you will, to keep the theft concealed. But the monthly minimum payment increased.
Okay, wait a minute. Wait, I got to stop you. You took the credit card, you were receiving the statements, and you were paying the month at 15 without your parents knowing.
At 15.
Where were you getting the money
actually,
to pay the statement, pay the bill?
From the ATM withdrawals that I was making off my dad's payment card.
Oh my goodness. This is unbelievable. Okay, so you took your dad's identity, your mother's, your grandparents. Was there anyone that you wouldn't target in your family or any relationship that was safe?
No. After having started with my parents, no one was exempt at that point. I mean, it was the lay of the land. I mean, and even in today's times, no one is protected from identity theft. So if I have no regard for my parents at that age and at that time in season, then anybody could have gotten it.
You obviously are brilliant. You had a 4.0 GPA in high school. And the fact that, again, as a teenager, you're figuring out how I'm going to get the card, how I'm going to conceal the crime, how I'm going to pay it off. Because the point in paying it off is to keep it going, to keep the credit limit going.
Exactly.
What influenced you? Did you see this on a television show? How did you know? Was it somebody in your neighborhood that told you this is possible and you can do it?
No, I was just a curious kid, and those curiosities led me down deeper and darker paths. And as I began to acquaint myself with the crime itself and understand that white-collar crimes were more lucrative and less punitive, I then began to scale it as a criminal career. And in seeking chance and opportunity, I would seek and search out different ways to devise and develop the scheme and scams so as to affect the desired outcome.
Were your family members, were other people noticing, because I'm sure you were now living this lavish lifestyle because you've got the purchase power that started all of this when you were a kid?
So my criminal exploits were twofold. I was a drug dealer and I was a white-collar criminal at the time. So the general public thought that I was accumulating these riches, if you will, by way of drug dealing. But I was actually accumulating them by way of white-collar criminal activities. So that was a concealment of crime within crime, if you will.
Well, eventually, in both of those occupations, time runs out. And time ran out on you with the identity theft. How did you get caught?
So my criminal exploits continued to net and land in repeated arrests. But I had enough money, so I had the best attorneys that money could buy. And just as long as I was bonding in and out of state custody, in and out of state jurisdictions and parish and prisons, I could elude, if you will, the criminal justice system. But when I garnered and gained the attention of the federal government, specifically the FBI, the Secret Service.
What caused you to get their attention? I mean, was it the ways that you were acquiring people's identity? What tipped the FBI off to what was happening?
Sure, the sophistication with which I was perpetrating the crime. So the replication of the documents, the counterfeiting of the payment cards, the duplication of the driver's license, the ability to manipulate, if you will, the DMV systems with the ID numbers, driver license numbers, the ability to capture the holograms on the payment cards.
How did you know how to do all of this? I mean, again, you're in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Not that that doesn't mean it can happen there, but how did you know how to duplicate credit cards, IDs? Where did you get this knowledge to pull this off on such a high level?
Sure, the trial and error, and then by way of acquaintances and criminal associates. So that collective knowledge comes together, and we bring it into a room and we brainstorm. And through trial and error, testing, or rather beta, testing the field of operation, you perfect the scheme and scam. And for me, that expertise came by way of repeated arrests. And then those arrests were documented, if you will, some of the items that was confiscated by law and law enforcement, which was eventually turned over to the higher authorities, and as such became part of their intent and deliberate investigations.
So you get caught eventually, despite everything that you built in this elaborate way, and you're behind bars, and you start to consult for the FBI. Was that by choice to get your time reduced?
Sure, yes, it was voluntary. It was an offer made to me. They were only interested in my knowledge acquisition and application, and how did I manifest the crimes that I was actually scaling and commission.
So
at
in
the time
basic
of
speak, they
perpetration.
wanted to know how you were pulling it off. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
because it reminds me, as you know, so much, and people have said this to you, that movie Catch Me If You Can, which Leo DiCaprio played this teenager, Frank Abagnale, who pulled this
Yes.
criminal enterprise off. So when the FBI finally got you, it wasn't so much about who else is doing it with you. It's you, kid, with this mastermind. How were you pulling this off?
Absolutely.
And what did you teach or tell them?
Their biggest concern was the replication of the documents, the social security cards, the birth certificates, the bill of sales, the car titles. These documents that are actually either federal or state documents, they wanted to know, how do you replicate that? Well, what printer type are you using to replicate these documents? What are your ink colors and schemes? And where are you getting the equipment from? How is the crime coming together? So they want to know the intricate parts and pieces that only a law enforcement agency or agent would be interested in knowing.
Coming up, how Dartanyon turned his life around after the break. Welcome back. We're talking with former master identity thief Dartanyon Williams, whose story mirrors that movie Catch Me If You Can. During his years in federal prison, he says he found God and turned his life around. And this past October, he married the love of his life, and she inspired a whole new chapter, if you will, of it. Dr. Lisa Williams joins us as well. Dr. Williams, thank you so much for joining us. Dartanyon, I want to go back real quick to, you had this moment before you fell in love. Now you're working with the feds and you're trying to figure out life. It's so interesting to me that you preyed on people's identity and then you had an identity crisis of your own, and that you no longer wanted to be a criminal. You wanted to turn your life around.
Right, exactly. And my kids, my children, played a huge part in that. For all of their days, I've been able to provide for them a very privileged lifestyle. But while being in federal prison and beginning to understanding the different modes of parenting, whether it was democratic, authoritarian, or authoritative, and started teaching those classes in prison, I began to understand the significant impact that my absence may or was in fact having on my children. And they were prominent in terms of making a decision in a more righteous direction.
Lisa, you wanted him to share his story because, I mean, obviously people will say, oh, wow, he's talking about all the money he did and, the criminal enterprise. But you saw something deeper, a greater cause than him that could help other people, because people believe identity theft is victimless, but it's not. It comes at a cost for those who have their ID stolen.
So true. And one of the things that I have to start by saying, in addition to thank you, Tamron, for bringing this critical issue to life, is that when I met D and we finally got past all of the beginning pieces. His heart is bigger than the chest that it resides in. He is such a good guy. Now, he's smart, he's sharp, and he's actually typically the smartest guy in the room unless I'm in the room. But
That's genius.
I always tease him about that. But he wanted to do something different, and his mind doesn't turn off. But he processes in a way that is, I think, a God-given gift. And there are times that we know, and I'm a Bible believer, and the scripture says we know that all things work together for good. And so he had to experience a dark side, I believe, so that he could bring intel into the light.
Right.
And so every year, I would say I want my New York Times best-selling novel for my birthday. And so I got it, and I'm really excited about it because I know that the stories that he'll tell and the information that he'll share will change the trajectory of this crime.